Still figuring out life? Good. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. I'm Mary Choi Kelly, PhD, mom, leadership coach, and C-suite veteran with 30 years of helping leaders thrive. On this podcast, Fresh Out and Figuring It Out, we give young adults the mic so they can share their stories and everyone listening can understand who they truly are and what's on their minds. We're also showing the real side of young men, one that defies stereotypes, so that we can rewrite the story together and help every young adult, both men and women, grow into confident, compassionate leaders who know their worth and lead with heart. Follow the show. We're figuring it out together, one story at a time. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fresh Out and Figuring It Out. Today, I have a very special guest on the show. And while my guests will primarily be young adults who will share their stories, this episode is very important and relevant today. And my guest is Dr. Carli Snyder, a board-certified licensed clinical psychologist in both Nevada and California, who has been in practice for 25 years. Her personal and professional belief is that health is wealth, and she views all her patients within a holistic framework. Dr. Snyder is a passionate lifelong learner and is committed to high-quality mental health care, and she's a dear friend of mine. So today on this episode, we're going to discuss the current state of young adults, both girls and boys. And Dr. Carli is going to share her observations and insights from working with young adults for the last 25 years. I really believe that this conversation is really important because it sets the table and provides context into why I am so passionate about challenging stereotypes and building a community that lifts everyone up, both our girls and our boys. In addition, this is just a really relevant conversation today, given the recent unfortunate and just tragic events surrounding Charlie Kirk's assassination. So let's dive in. First, I begin every episode with a question because life is about choices. So, Carli, I want to just have you kick it off with your thoughts on a would you rather question. All right. So, would you rather go back and give advice to your 25-year-old self or get a glimpse of your 85-year-old self?
That's a hard one. Part of me would want to do both, but I know that's the whole thing. You have to make a choice, which is part of life. I would say probably a glimpse of my 80-year-old self. And part of the reason is that I do believe, although life is messy and maybe there are certain things that didn't go as planned, I feel as though each struggle that I did have kind of got me to where I am today, and that we are truly a work in progress. And the key is growth and continual learning.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that answer. And it kind of goes consistent with your just overall philosophy in your practice and your life. I think if I had to answer the question, I may say the same thing because I'm also curious. I think the world's going to be so different in 25, 30 years, right? It's just crazy what
Different. Because
could
think
be.
25 years ago, 24 years ago was 9/11, and think about how fast that went.
Exactly.
We all know exactly where we were. So, I mean, imagine 25 years from now.
So you and I met over 10 years ago when
Sure.
I first moved to Las Vegas. And I think the thing with having kids is that you get to meet amazing families and people. Just really fortunate to be able to call you my friend and love everything that you do and everything that you're about. So can you just take a moment to tell the audience a little bit more about you?
Absolutely. I graduated as a clinical psychologist in 2000, but I graduated with a health emphasis, which back then was very strange to people. And I didn't talk a lot about it. I would just say, oh, I'm a clinical psychologist. I have my doctorate in psychology. But what it was is mindfulness, the whole mind body connection, all the stuff that we're now is so relevant and
Wow. So that was super progressive.
Very progressive. One of my textbooks was actually the original book by John Kabat-Zinn, who developed mindfulness. So, very early in that kind of cutting edge wellness world, mind body connection, but then also very traditional clinical psychology. But the emphasis was really my love because I truly believe then, and I believe now more than ever, just it's a holistic approach. And how we sleep, what we eat, everything about us.
Don't you feel like now you're like, okay, everyone's waking up and getting it because that's all you see now? And over the last 25 years, like that's what you knew already?
Right. And it's funny too because I started doing yoga probably over 25 years ago. It's wonderful to see people involved and understanding it and it just mainstream.
Yeah, I love it.
New age, it's not weird. It works.
Yeah, I think a lot about kind of in the wellness area, like juicing
Mhm.
or eating certain foods and all that. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's hysterical to me because I grew up being forced to drink green juice ever since I can remember. My parents had a little garden and they would juice up like spinach and beets and carrots. And it was just, they didn't think about throwing an apple in there to make it, a little more palatable. We just had this thick, like concoction of green vegetables that we had to drink every single night. So I just,
That's why your skin is so gorgeous.
you're so sweet. I just laugh because it's like, oh, now everyone's talking about juicing and this and that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I guess my parents were onto something
Yeah.
30 years ago. But how did you actually get into this field?
So I always joke around that I was like the first or second grader on the playground doing a session with another kid my age and or younger or older, and I just was always that kid that just naturally was empathic, naturally just wanted to help people, was just very much, I don't know if like a peacekeeper, which I found a profession where I could actually hone it and get educated. So I always joke around that I
You're
made,
born into it.
yeah. So, but I really do love what I do. And actually, truly, I was going the medical school route originally, and I didn't want to work that hard.
Okay, Carly, we never really talked about this, but we have a lot more similarities than we even knew. So I thought I wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
And I remember a family friend who was over one night and I was in high school and she was actually in medical school and just starting her residency. And she said to me when I said I wanted to be a doctor, and she said, Mary, do you like sick people? And I said, no. I don't want to be around sick people. And she goes, well, you may not want to be a doctor. And it totally stuck with me. And I actually changed my mind when she said that because I was like, I never even thought about what a doctor does, right? I'm like, I
Right.
liked biology and I thought that might be interesting and challenging. And so I decided to go for a psychology degree because I thought, what's close to being a doctor? I don't know why I thought that, but I thought, okay, maybe I'll get a psychology degree. And similar to you, throughout high school, I felt like I was a student psychologist. All my friends came to me with their problems. I got super invested in all their issues, trying to give them ideas and solutions. Unlike you, I actually learned that I didn't want to do that because I found myself so involved in
Yes.
their problems. And
Yeah.
then 6 months down the road, we were having the same conversation. And
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a second, I was so invested in what you
Mhm.
were telling me, and wait, you didn't do anything about it? Like, we're still talking about the same thing?
My time, right?
Yeah, I don't know that I could do this. This is
Yeah.
super frustrating for me. So
Yeah, it can be very frustrating, and that's where you have to really surrender to that everybody's on their own journey, and that it's truly an inside job, and you can't, I mean, you can, and as a psychologist, you don't give advice. I always joke around, like, because I'll meet someone and they'll ask me what I do, and I say, "I'm a psychologist," and they'll say, "What am I thinking?" And I say, "I'm a psychologist, not a psychic." Like,
right, or a mind reader.
but truthfully, a really good psychologist is not gonna necessarily give advice, but they're gonna help you find what is going to work for you inside, right? Like it's an inside job.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And, I've been to therapy many, many times and I believe in it wholeheartedly. And to your point, it is about you and your readiness and what you want to, learn, how you want to develop and grow. And unless someone is truly ready, it's basically, going to an office to a doctor and not taking the medicine, right? If you're not ready for it, then
Like,
it doesn't really do anybody any good.
yes, yes, very true.
So I think you already touched on kind of one of my questions, which was like, what do you love about what you do? You know,
Except for collecting money.
yeah, yeah, okay. And then what are some of the things that you don't like to do? Because I think, for the audience, there probably are people out there that think, oh, yeah, I want to be a psychologist. Well, what are some things that you love? And what are some things that, just come with the territory that maybe you don't really enjoy as much?
Yeah, well, I think the business side of it, it's you go into this because you just want to help people. But the truth is, you have to have boundaries. And that piece is always hard. But the things that I don't like, I mean, I don't think there's really anything. I mean, probably just the business side of it and just, the administrative side.
Which is so important,
Yeah.
especially if you work for yourself. Like I've left the corporate world a couple years ago. And when I started to work on my own, I quickly realized that, wait, I
Yeah.
don't have an admin that's going to book my travel, that's going to do my expense reports and schedule my meetings. Like you're looking at her
Yeah.
and it sucks up so much
Yeah.
time. And it's a critical part of any business.
And you have to, obviously you're a professional and there's a lot of legal and ethical issues that you have to take continuing education classes. So there is a lot of like administrative things to keep going and all the tests related to, getting these certain certifications and all of that is not the fun stuff. The fun
Right.
stuff
Is
watching
doing the work.
yeah, is watching people grow and just helping them live their best lives.
Yeah, and see the progress. I'm sure that's
And the
super
progress.
rewarding.
Very. And not and it's ve and some people, it's they have these aha moments and kind of back to your podcast and working with young men and women, I think they are the best age to work with because that's where you see the real growth. Their brains are just they're still developing and they're still, not fully hardwired yet. So when they make these changes and
They
they
can be really profound, right?
very profound and incredible results and can really help change their lives.
One of the reasons why I have such passion around this group is I've spent 30 years working with mature adults, let's call them mature adults, people in their 40s and 50s,
Right.
and trying to help them develop leadership skills. Well, there's not a lot that's going to change, right? Yes, there's incremental change and there's new behaviors and things, but people are kind of stuck in their patterns and their habits. And I wouldn't say stuck, but they're pretty cemented, right? So there has to be a real kind of deep drive and reason for change for people to want to do it. And the young adults, to your point, they're curious. They're looking to grow, can be molded. Such a great kind of time in our lives, right? I'd love to go back to my 20s in some ways. In some ways, maybe not.
Not in this climate.
Yeah,
I
true.
would want back our 20s. No,
Yeah,
no phones.
yeah, it's a
This
good point.
20s for this generation, very hard 20s.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would survive it. So let's jump into kind of this episode. And I already mentioned that this conversation today is really important to me because it gets to the heart of two of the big objectives on my podcast, which is to challenge stereotypes and to rewrite harmful narratives, especially about young men. And then, secondly, to build a community that lifts everyone up where women and men thrive together. So, over the last 50 years, we've seen significant efforts to support and empower girls, which has been just amazing. And I know you've spent a lot of your career working with girls. At a high level, the research and data kind of just summarize that girls are outperforming boys, and they're outperforming boys at all ages and in all areas, whether it's entering college at higher rates, graduating college at higher rates, et cetera, et cetera. So tell us a little bit about what you've learned.
Yes, I mean it's so true. And I mean, from even a young age, by 8th grade, girls are outperforming boys, sometimes by a full grade level. And then we have 47% of women have bachelor's degrees versus 37% of men. You and I were actually talking, and we were kind of like, how did we get here? Why is this? That even though there's so much been put to empowering young women and kind of lifting them up, and maybe we've lifted them up so much that they're now just ahead.
Tell us a little bit about what you've done and just other observations that you've seen. The data is very clear.
About 15 years ago, I started, actually, even like 20 years ago, I started a program. And at the time, there was such this need of, because I would have all these girls come in to see me. And it was the same stuff. I mean, just so much depression, so much anxiety, so much drama with girlfriends, a lot of self harm, a lot of really bad body image, eating disorders. And a lot of times I would think about it and I would wonder, what is the common kind of denominator with these girls that I keep seeing? And for me, what it seemed as though at the time was all of them were really missing a good friend group, a good community of other young girls their age. And some of them didn't even have one friend. And I do think having just one friend can make a big difference. But sort of community, a group was somewhat of the common. And some of them had even talked about wanting more friends or wanting to be part of a group. So over about 10, 15 years ago, I developed a company called Girl Nation. And the whole mission was bringing girls together to connect and collaborate and support each other rather than compete. So it was like the original kind of girls lifting girls, girls supporting girls group.
I just want to kind of pause right there because intuitively we would think girls and women would naturally support each other, right? Because those are the behaviors and the traits that you associate with femininity is around connection, relationships, I don't have young girls or girls. However, just being a woman and my experience and, how it's difficult. Sometimes the friends that you think you have are oftentimes the ones that aren't there to support you when you really need them, and I've experienced that. So it's an interesting, like, dynamic.
It is. And also, I mean, as you know, Mary, being in the corporate world.
Yeah, I can talk all day about that. I mean, unfortunately, the people that supported me most in my career have been men.
Yeah. And that is actually sadly sometimes because I think the women are just trying to get to the top themselves, which brings it to like masculinity, which I know is a big topic we're going to talk about. And it's almost as though if you're that woman, you're a masculine woman, you're aggressive, you're right. Like,
Yes, you know
it,
what you want, you're a
right.
driver, etcetera. You make a really good point about that, the competitiveness, especially in the corporate arena, and it probably is true even in, the school, years, because that popularity or whatever, the dynamic and the status might be different. At the end of the day, it's kind of a certain level of power or influence, right? And so I do a ton of work with women in leadership in the corporate world. I talk a lot about the mindset. That competitive mindset comes from this belief of scarcity,
Yes.
right? That
Yes.
there's limited opportunities and limited resources. So if I help others, then I'm
Mhm.
reducing my chances.
Yep.
And I coach people about changing that mindset to a mindset of abundance
I love that.
because, in fact, if I help you
Mhm.
or another woman or five other women and uplift you,
Yes.
then there's five more other women
Mhm.
that are there to uplift others. And that is how we create change and how we create and live this mindset of abundance that rather than thinking that it's, me versus you, it's actually how do we create more opportunities for everyone?
And I think that's incredible because what you're doing is hopefully changing the narrative. And then these five women are going to mentor another 5 women, and it's this chain reaction.
That is the whole idea with abundance, right? Like we're actually creating more for everyone versus, competing with one another. So, the data about women and girls is super positive and exciting. And the other piece of it for us to remember is that in order for the lives of women to truly change, we need to bring men along with us. So, I'd love to kind of now talk about the current state of the other half of our population. And it appears that we are leaving boys behind. And just to level set, um, we're talking about young men right now. We're not talking about the men that are
No.
in their 50s and 60s. Times have changed and there's been a significant shift in how we view young men today. And this generation of young men are in some ways paying the price for the unfair advantage that men who are now in their 50s and 60s had. And just to paint the picture, I want to share a few key points that Scott Galloway shared on the Rich Rolls on Rich Roll's podcast in its episode 826. I think everybody should listen to this episode if you're interested in this topic. And for those of you who don't know Scott Galloway, he is a professor of marketing at NYU's Business School. He's an entrepreneur, podcast host of Prof G podcast, and co-host of Pivot podcast, and probably a lot of other things. He's an author, speaker, and advocate for young men. And I'm going to kind of share a couple points that he made. In addition to all the results that Carli, you shared, he says that today more single women own a home than a single man. And in urban areas in the US, women under the age of 30 make more money than men. And this is like awesome. It's just amazing news. And now on the flip side, the data that he shares is just overwhelming and just downright scary. Young men are 3 times more likely to be addicted, 4 times more likely to kill themselves when compared to women, 12 times more likely to be incarcerated, and 70% more opioid overdoses are with young men. So he says this, these are his words. We don't have an opioid problem, a homelessness problem, an incarceration problem, a suicide problem. We have a male homelessness, incarceration, suicide problem. And he also takes a step further and says that if any other special interest group were committing suicide at 4 times the rate of a control group, we would be talking about the need for social programs, intervention, having empathy for them. But when it happens to young men, there's just a lack of empathy. Instead, we hear words like, there needs to be accountability or they need to be more in touch with their emotions. And his message hit me hard.
Yeah, it's very upsetting. Very upsetting. I felt the same way.
Right? And before we go too far into this conversation, I want to bring up the social construct of masculinity because that's what it is. It's a social construct, and we're going to talk a lot about this. Masculinity is not whether you're a man or a woman. There are women who demonstrate masculinity. It's a
Absolutely.
behavior. And in fact, it's kind of funny that my PhD dissertation was actually about masculine and feminine behavior traits. And this construct really falls apart when we talk about masculinity as if we were only talking about men. And so today, masculinity has in many ways become synonymous with toxicity. And
Mm.
this narrative about toxic masculinity has been widely accepted, in my opinion. And that label has really gotten in the way of any productive conversation about this topic. And this is why I believe so strongly that what we're discussing today is super important. And one of the primary reasons why I started this podcast, I want to open up the conversation. I want us to redefine what being a young man is and to support both our sons and our daughters. So I know that was a lot of kind of preamble to this conversation. I wanted to really level set why we're talking about this. Carli, you're like really such a perfect person to have this conversation with because, in addition to your clinical background, you're a mom of 3 boys.
And I live and for a fourth boy, my husband,
Yeah.
4 boys.
Yeah, the oldest one, which I know that I talk about the oldest boy that I have in my family, which is the toughest one, I think.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. So I know that recently you've worked with a lot more young men as well in your practice. So tell me about that.
Well, it started during COVID. And one of the things I love about kind of this movement towards, as Scott Galloway talked about, the lonely boy, he has a whole
Yeah,
series.
the lonely basement boys.
Yes, the lonely boys or the, yes. And one of the things that I really noticed was I was getting a lot of phone calls from moms. And I guess the reason why I brought Scott up was he talked about how it's the moms that are starting to really take charge and say what's going on. Why is this happening? Why are the boys being left behind? What is going on in our world right now? The irony was these were moms that I'd actually already helped their daughters. So they already knew me, and I was getting a lot of calls during COVID, and it's pretty much continued for the past, I think, 5 years, and a lot more male patients. And what I've learned is what most of my girls were coming in for very similar stuff with my boys is this lack of friends, this real loneliness, this a lot of pressure to succeed. So many of the same things that the girls struggle with. But how they present themselves is very different. So I do believe with boys, when they do finally come in, sadly, they have been in this state usually much longer because the parents don't know, because boys tend to be traditionally less emotive.
Right.
So you see more isolation or agitation and less outwardly talking about the
Right.
anxiety.
It's not explicit. You don't really see it on the surface. The behaviors don't come out with the
Right.
crying or the emotional reach out for help or what have you. And to
Mhm.
your point, like boys when they hurt, I think they probably feel uncomfortable with that because it conflicts with the view of what a man should be, right? Like we tell boys from a very young age, the message from society is you got to man up and be tough and just get over it.
Soft. Don't be soft. Don't cry like a girl, right?
Because of that, I mean, we all live in this society, we have social expectations, and they don't hone their skills. And therefore, they have trouble building relationships or looking to relationships
Yeah.
to address their emotional distress or their loneliness. Quite honestly, how do they, I guess, work it out?
Well, and I do think also, as we know, there's less play. The kids are not, there's less time outside to play and get it out. And that's why I do love the work that's being done with all the cell phones being taken away and in middle school at least collecting them and making the kids actually talk during lunch or go outside and maybe play basketball during any free time. They don't have their phones to just sit there and stare at and be zombies and not connect.
So there's been an uptick. Started with COVID, it's continuing. And I'm wondering, because boys didn't really have an outlet, they didn't really know how to ask for help, they don't really want to show their emotions. Is that just kind of the trend that you're seeing?
It is the trend. And I question it's starting much younger and younger. And when you think about it, boys need mentors and they need male mentors. Whether it's, having great friends is great, but having even a friend's father having so I think the lack of mentors out there. And when you think about it too, I think it's 92% of the teachers are female. And a lot of times they don't quite understand a young boy's brain and that the prefrontal cortex is much more immature than a girl's prefrontal
Yeah, it's
cortex.
not fully developed till they're 25. Right?
Girls' prefrontal cortex is definitely more mature than a boy's. I mean, they're still both maturing, but I don't think the teachers understand it. And so you see a lot more behavioral issues and then labels put on them very quickly. And then so I do think, they're falling through the cracks there's always, of course, not all boys are falling through the cracks, but a good amount of them are that may need that time to run around or to do whatever it is. And I also do think that the the culture with their smartphones, there is less of a reason to leave the house and go outside. They're all connecting that way. And some of these young men who don't have great friends or a community at school will find people online to talk to. And a lot of them get themselves in a lot of trouble because they get, I mean, the whole catfish where they get sucked into maybe really dark communities, which is what we're now seeing as well, where some of them are getting radicalized, which Scott talks a lot about.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting time. There is this idea of connection, with all the social media and online access, et cetera. But is it really true connection? Is it really building the relationships and having that human touch? Regardless of how helpful technology is, there's nothing like having a conversation face to face with somebody, right? You can't replace that. I also think that one of the reasons why it's really difficult to raise this issue about young men is that there's a natural visceral reaction that says, how can we talk about supporting men when we should be uplifting women and people of color? Historically, men have been fine, or they're the ones that are in power and have status. What are you talking about? I think that really stands in our way of saying, well, this isn't about either or. Because we're saying that men need support does not mean that other people don't need support.
It's I think in certain groups, people would be shocked because I don't think, and I do believe there's many people out there that don't realize this. I mean, you and we have young men, and we are in the presence of young men based on the population. Our boys are now, they're now at that age. And so we see it happening where there's many people out there that might not even know this is happening.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think that if you look at the history
Hmm.
and look at the boardroom or the
Yeah.
corporate
Yeah.
profiles or, all the things, and really men are in power. That
Yeah.
is a fact.
Still are.
Yeah, so there's no argument there.
So it's, you talk about it, but yet you look around, whether it's in government, whether it's in corporations, because they are still in power. But like you beautifully said before, we're not talking about like 45 plus, right? Age 45 plus. We're talking about more like 18 to 34.
Yeah, we're talking about the young men, exactly, and I think that's where there can be that lack of understanding or awareness.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. I think at one point when we were talking about this, I loved what you said. You're like, "Who knew we would have to worry about our boys," right?
Yeah, and I think I shared with you the high school that my middle son graduated from. There was a big ceremony prior to graduation for awards, and everyone was there because they were getting an award. And but the main awards were the ones for like the real outstanding, and it was wild. It was female after female after female. So there was a part of me that was, wow, yes, girl power, love this. But then another part of me was thinking, where's Luke and all his friends? I mean, I think they're all really special and incredibly talented and bright, and not many of them were being called up. And it was very strange. I had this really visceral reaction where I felt it for
Yeah.
like probably the first time personally.
So there's another interesting concept. Tell us a little bit about this concept of the pressure from within.
The pressure within is from each other, and that they are not necessarily encouraged.
So boys and
Yeah,
men, right? The
yeah,
pressure that boys feel from other boys or
yeah.
from other men.
Yes. So I do think they are not necessarily encouraged to be vulnerable, encouraged to emote. It's much more comfortable to watch sports together and just keep it very light and keep it very superficial and kind of troll each other. And it's kind of like that's almost behavior that is expected or so there's not really so when you say within every culture, whether it's male or female, a lot of it's the pressure within.
So whether it's a male group or a female group or a Korean group or whatever group you're in, the
Yeah.
pressure of that group kind of keeps people in line, right? They are the ones that are the guardians of that culture or the expectation or what have you. So again, going back to our social pressures and another, tidbit that I got from Esther Perel's podcast, she was saying that men treat struggling men with suspicion.
Yeah, I love that. So if you see a man that's hurting, it threatens their own masculinity, and it's very painful and uncomfortable. And I actually had this experience in therapy just recently with a male patient where I said to him, let's try to find positive role models who you can look at who are very comfortable with their emotion. And the only person he could think of was his cousin who was older, and he thought he was weird. He was the only one he could think of that was like very emotional, and he thought he was weird, and that he actually has always thought of him more as weak. He could not think of anybody that he respected or looked up to that was in touch with their emotions. So the lack of role models.
Yeah, that's a big one. So what's interesting too is that there are exceptions to this, right?
Of
Like, you look at beyond individual exceptions, like you look at things like sports or the military, there are really strong bonds and connections amongst
Yes,
men. What the theory is that men, when they have something in common with
mhm.
each other, whether it's a church group or a sports team or the military, and in which case, I mean, they're willing to die for one another. I mean, the bond is incredibly strong. So there's something there for us to really take away and learn.
And I also believe it's, when a sports team, like a football team, a soccer team, when they win, it's not weird when they cry, right? And
Or
it's
if they lose, I
and
mean,
I was
like anything, right? I mean, like the emotions that they share, there just comes out naturally.
and it's not as shamed, right? Like you do see that and nobody really makes fun of them. As anything, it's seen as passion. It's seen as part of the game, right? Like, but you have to have played a game, like been on the field to do that. That's the only place it's acceptable. Yeah. To your thought process and what you were saying before, the military. I mean, that is brotherhood. And sadly, what is happening because of the high substance abuse with men is that they are finally getting the community more in the recovery community. So when they then recover, they are finally getting that community and they are getting the sponsorship. And once again, that connection that they were maybe connecting to a substance or gambling. And that was what was feeding them at the time.
Yeah, so at that point, they've got a common bond,
Yes.
and so that's the thread, right? With men, they tend to develop those deep connections and relationships and demonstrate support in a very, very committed and effective way when they
Mhm.
have a common bond. So, I guess one of the questions for us is really how do we kind of create that, right? Outside of some very extraordinary circumstances. We spent a lot of time talking about girls and boys separately to this point. And another goal on my podcast is to stop polarizing the conversation and to really bring things together and to talk about what's common across our girls and our boys. So, what are you seeing across both girls and boys?
I think they're both struggling. They're both struggling. And that's the true duality of what's going on with the girls. As much as they're soaring in certain ways, they've never been more depressed. They've never been more anxious. They've never suffered. I mean, I thought we were on a great road body image and eating disorders. More girls are struggling with eating disorders again than ever before, thanks to, the sorority rushes and the
Social
TikTok.
media, I mean, like you can't
Yeah,
escape it.
you can't escape it. And so I do think, and the boys are also struggling with their bodies. I mean, everything is supplements and the gym and seed oils. And, I mean, it's so much pressure. to look a certain way and to the social status of being part of a group and where you go. So they're really struggling and suffering from such similar things: loneliness, wanting to belong, wanting a connection. They want the same things.
When I listen to you, it's like this isn't a competition, right? It's not about who's suffering more. It's really the fact that at the end of the day,
Yeah.
girls and boys have a lot in common, right? I mean, they
Yeah.
want to be connected, they want relationships, they want trust, they want respect. So the real big question is how do we level up young men, much like we have been doing and continue to do for young women? I just go back to the fact that, this is not a boy issue. This isn't a, boy mom issue. This is a us everyone issue because our young men are the future husbands,
Mhm.
fathers, the role models that you talk about. I mean, this impacts everyone. There is some clear data that shows that if this pattern continues, it's dire and that trajectory impacts everyone.
Yeah.
So I just, some people may be kind of depressed listening to this. So,
Oh, we have to
what
stay
are
right, and we have to stay in the hope. And
yeah,
listen,
so
we're talking about it, and
right.
that we're
Which is
talking
which is a big part of
right.
it, right? Being aware, bringing the conversation to light, not shying away from the fact that we need to talk about supporting men and women. So I agree. What are some of the solutions? Like, where do we go from here?
Yeah. I mean, I do think bringing girls and boys together and maybe not keeping them so apart. Although, same sex, as we know, schools and camps, that helps. Maybe doing both actually is what I'm trying to say. Groups and connection for boys, more of that for them because we know it works for girls. We know that. We know it works for boys because of what we've seen in the military and what we see from church groups, any kind of faith based group. They create connection, and when you have good connection, you have higher mental health. If there's one thing we all took away from COVID is that we need connection, and connection breeds physical and mental health. They are connected. You cannot have mental health without physical health and physical health without mental health. You need both to have a good life, right?
Yeah.
So I do think bringing them together to connect over that they're actually not so different.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think you talked about a couple things before as well is, for example, the role models. I mean, and I saw this with my boys, right? It's anything I say or even their dad says, they may kind of hear it, may not totally internalize it, but as soon as a friend's dad says it, they're
Yes.
paying attention.
Yes, I think that is amazing when you have good men around and to encourage young men to find mentors, whether it's a friend's father or whether it's a
An
friend.
older brother, like somebody's older brother, right? Like, looking up to, people within their peer group, I mean,
Yeah,
I think is a huge thing.
yeah, I could not agree with you more. And I think there is so much to learn. And everyone likes to help others because it makes you feel needed. So to encourage our young men to start asking for help, and that it doesn't mean you're weak or that there's something wrong with you, but that true strength is reaching out.
Well, and part of it is normalizing that. So, as more young men see
Hmm.
other peers and young
Hmm.
men asking for help,
Yeah.
showing their emotions, reaching out when they are lonely, even though it's hard, when they see more of that, then they may see that, okay, it's
Hmm.
okay for me to do that.
Yeah. And it brings me back to kind of what you said you do with, the five young women that you mentor and provide leadership and lift up. And then in hopes that these five women will then come in and lift up. So that same kind of mentorship with men that when they go and help somebody. So really encouraging service. I think there's nothing better than getting out of yourself and giving to somebody else. Nothing gives you a good feeling more than providing help, advice. They always feel better when they get outside of themselves.
Yeah, I think that's true of everybody, right? I mean, it's just the best way to overcome kind of a challenge or a personal issue that you're facing is to really, um, be of service because that leads to gratefulness. So I think that's a great, great example. Again, some of this stuff can be a bit overwhelming. And, even some of the things that we've talked about, it's not necessarily new or breakthrough. It's fundamentally just going back to some basic things that we know about human connection, right?
I agree. And it's like getting out, right? Like getting out of the house sometimes and just being with nature. Being like, not that you have to go on like a hike, but just take a walk outside, look at the trees. I mean, really basic things. And just maybe as hard as it is, like put your phone down for 10 minutes and connect with something else.
There's something super healthy about that, to be present and to really be in the moment, to give your body, your brain, your emotions, everything a rest. So I think your point is really, really well taken. So as we kind of look back at everything that we've talked about in closing, what would you recommend to our listeners? Is there one thing that you think that they can do today?
Well, I mean, there's a few, but I think one of the things I think can be very helpful is to really lean in, surrender to saying, this is where I'm at today. I want to be better. I can be better. And that action, some kind of action will absorb the anxiety, right? Like you get out there, you do something, take some action, leave the house, do anything, be with strangers, smile at a random person you've never seen. I really believe action is everything and one step in front of the next, literally.
It's really hard to take that first action. And once you do, you find that it leads to another thing, right? It's like action creates another action, and then you've got momentum.
Yes. And that's, I think, exactly it. You beautifully said that, get out there, action absorbs anxiety. And the distraction of just getting out there, whatever you do, it's just get out, whether it's get out in nature, get out with strangers, just leave your house. And to somebody who is not struggling with anxiety or depression, it sounds ridiculous, right? Like, what do you mean, leave your house? But to somebody who is, it can be a very hard thing to do.
Yeah, great. Anything else?
Um, I recently read a study that I thought was so interesting, and it really ties to what we were talking about today. A woman, Bonnie Ware, an Australian palliative nurse who spent, I think it was 30 to 40 years working with people dying, and how there are five things that people really regret and feel. And the two that really stuck in my brain was they wish they had the courage to express their feelings. And then the second one was, I wish I had the courage to live a true life for myself and not for others. So, those two things that on your deathbed that you regret not showing more emotion and living your life for yourself and not others.
That's great advice. And I think there's a lot of other kind of studies and research that has found that when you lean into your relationships and really feel your emotions, that has a direct impact
Yeah.
on your health, your longevity, your happiness, etc. So that kind of brain body connection is real. So it's just, I think, a really great message. And I also think that one of the biggest things that we can all do, and I'm all about focus on the small things that we can control and what we can do. And in that light, one of the things that I'd like to suggest to everyone listening is just having a small shift in our language is a powerful next step, right? It's not about us versus them or either or. It's an and.
Yeah.
And that single change creates a completely different conversation and mindset. So, how do we support both women and men so that all young adults can thrive? And to wrap it up, I'd really like to reinforce some advice I heard from, again, Professor Galloway, and it's really consistent with things that I believe. Young men, the advice is to lean into your emotions. And that's something, Carly, that you said, right? Feel it. When you're sad, really feel it. When you're happy, really feel it. But if you want to cry, cry, because all of those emotions are what really informs what's important to you. If you're crying about it, it's super important to you.
Yeah,
And
it's real.
that's
It's real.
important to know, right? Like
Real.
that's going to help you figure out what's important to you, what you're good at. Otherwise, if you don't feel those emotions, you're not really registering anything and you're
No.
just going through the movements. So, if you feel
Where anxiety comes in, right? If you don't
yeah.
feel it comes
Yeah.
out
So, if you're feeling distressed or alone or in pain, reach out to someone, anyone. And
anyone.
anyone. And my advice right now to anybody listening out there that if you don't know who that person is, find that person. Take a simple action. That's one thing you can do today. Find somebody.
And take a risk too. I think people are so scared to reach out, but take a risk and reach out.
And most likely that risk will be rewarded. I know that throughout my life, when I have reached out to people, they have been there. Sometimes they don't know. So reach out, find somebody. If you don't have that person, find that person. It could be anybody. And finally, two messages that I'm hoping people take away from this episode. Our boys and young men are being left behind. And this is a problem that everyone should be aware of, should be invested in. That's my opinion. And we need to support our young men. We need to talk about it. We need a movement similar to the one that we have for young women, and they can live side by side. And it starts with the awareness and the conversation in order for us to drive change. And I'm hoping to overcome the barrier of talking about young men because of this, you know, narrative about toxic masculinity that I believe has really stood in our way. And that's really been unproductive. So I hope that more people will engage in this conversation and dialogue that you have. And I really appreciate you, Carly, for joining me today on this very, very important topic and for sharing your story, your expertise, and especially since I know you're headed to Argentina tomorrow morning to see your oldest son. I know that your time is really precious. So I
Yeah.
really, really thank you for the time that you've given me today. And want you to give your son a big hug from all of us and wishing you safe travels. So, again, thanks again, Carly, for helping us figure it out.
Absolutely. And my pleasure. I've enjoyed being here.
Cool. Thanks so much. See you later. Thanks for listening to this episode. And now it's your turn. Take what you heard today and put it into action. Share this episode with a friend who's figuring life out too. And let's build a generation of leaders who lead with heart. Follow the show, leave a review, and connect with me on social so we can keep figuring it out together. See you next time.